what if the most profound act of love for your family was actually to leave them? It sounds crazy, right? But an ancient Buddhist text makes this exact argument, and it completely flips one of our most basic duties on its head: loyalty to our parents. So get this. This was the accusation that was thrown at the Buddha himself. A rival teacher started spreading it around, basically painting him not as some enlightened master, but as a terrible, heartless son who just up and ditched his family, leaving his poor father in agony. This wasn't just some high-minded philosophical debate. No, this was a deeply personal public attack. And it really forces us to ask a question that cuts right to the heart of his story. I mean, think about it. He left behind a life of total luxury, a loving father, a wife, an entire kingdom. So, was the Buddha actually a bad son? Now, this accusation wasn't just some outside gossip. It actually seeped into the Buddha's inner circle, and it caused a serious crisis of faith for one of his closest followers. Just try to imagine being Ananda for a second. He's the Buddha's devoted attendant, right? And he's just walking through the city, and he starts overhearing people whispering, repeating these awful rumors about his teacher, calling him ungrateful, cruel to his own family. And those words, they stung. Ananda went back to the Buddha, just completely troubled and ashamed. He had to know the truth. So he asked him, point blank, about filial piety, the sacred duty to honor your parents. He essentially asked, in everything you teach, is there even a place for that? It's a question just loaded with doubt. The Buddha's response? Well, it wasn't a simple yes or no. Instead, he answered with a story from one of his past lives, and let me tell you, it is a shocking and incredibly deep story. He tells the story about a king, a queen, and their young son, Prince Sudana. They're on the run, fleeing for their lives after a coup. But in their panic, they take a wrong turn straight into a barren desert. Here's the problem. Their supplies were packed for a 7-day journey, but they're on a 14-day path to absolutely nowhere. They're starving, dehydrated, with enemies on their tail. They are facing certain death. And just when the king is about to kill the queen so he can survive, their son, Prince Sudana, steps in with this just unthinkable offer. He tells his parents to take a knife and carve flesh from his own body every single day to feed themselves and make it out alive. And they do it. With literally no other choice, the desperate parents slice pieces of flesh from their living son day after day, eating it to stay alive. It's an act of almost unimaginable horror and sacrifice. Finally, with his body nearly carved to the bone, the prince is left behind to die. But as he's lying there, he makes this incredibly powerful vow to use the merit from this horrific sacrifice to one day become a Buddha and free all beings from suffering. And at that exact moment, a miracle happens. The heavens themselves tremble, and his body is made whole again. So why? Why on earth would he tell such a gruesome, brutal story to answer a question about family loyalty? Because it's a metaphor for a vastly, massively expanded idea of who our family really is. The Buddha was introducing a concept we can call cosmic kinship, and the idea is pretty mind-blowing. It's that because we have all been reborn for countless lifetimes, every single living being in existence, every person, every animal, every tiny insect, has at some point been our mother or our father. Just as the sutra itself says, we have been parents to everyone, and everyone has been a parent to us. All of a sudden, the definition of family just explodes. It expands from the handful of people in your home to literally every living thing. And this radical idea, it just redefines everything. If everyone has been our parent, then our debt of gratitude isn't just owed to 2 people. It's owed to everyone. Which leads to a huge question, right? I mean, how could you possibly repay a debt that immense? How do you show loyalty and gratitude to a family that includes every single being in the entire universe? Well, the text gives a surprisingly clear answer. The ultimate repayment, the truest form of filial piety, is to practice the path to enlightenment. It's a vow to liberate every single one of those past parents, which means all beings, from the endless, painful cycle of suffering and rebirth. And then, the Buddha reveals the final piece of the puzzle to Ananda. He tells him that he was Prince Sudana in that past life. The gruesome sacrifice of his own flesh wasn't literal. It was a metaphor for the absolute, total commitment it takes to save your true cosmic family. So in that light, leaving his father and his kingdom wasn't an act of abandonment at all. It was an act of ultimate loyalty to all families across all of time.
So what does this leave us with? This ancient story proposes a really radical reimagining of what duty even means. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the highest form of love isn't limited to caring for the family you were born into, but expands to include every being you've ever called family, even if you can no longer remember their names.